Okay, that's everybody except for me, and I've kind of got a lot to say, so I wrote a script because there's some things that I want to make sure I get right. But first, I'll introduce myself. My name is Zachery Exum. I use they, them pronouns. It was only 3 years ago I came out as non-binary, which I do identify as trans non-binary, and before that, I didn't even really know that that was an option. Like, I never felt normal, but I didn't think I was, say, trans female, and I didn't really know how to feel or how to identify until I met someone, and I made a connection with someone who did identify as non-binary, and when that happened, I was like, oh, that makes complete sense. Why did no one ever tell me this? And that's why I want to do things like this, is because a lot of times people just don't know what the possibilities are. They don't know how to express themselves, and a lot of times the only thing that's taught is one perspective, one way, you know, the cis, straight, which is fine, obviously, but like, things aren't being told to people that are normal and natural, and it leads them down bad paths. And so that's one of the big reasons I wanted to be here today and hold this event together, and I'm really glad all of you came out. But what I want to talk about is, well, one, I actually want to give a shout out to the Spalding County Democratic Committee for helping me put this on. It wouldn't be what it is without them. And also I want to give a shout out to, actually, I'm not sure if any of them are still here. Are you on the diversity?
I'm not.
No, they were here. Some of them were here earlier, but I actually do want to thank the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Is that what they're called? I have it written down. Yeah, the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, because just a few days ago, the mayor of Griffin did a proclamation proclaiming that June is Pride Month, which of course June is Pride Month nationally, but that was the first time that the Griffin City Council recognized that, and that was a big deal, and it was all thanks to them for setting that up. But yeah, how can people get involved to sort of help the situation get better? Because no matter what it is, there's a lot of different problems in our community. Even though it's a great community and we're coming together today, there are still things that can get better and get better nationally. Let me find it here. These words are pretty small. So one thing I wanted to point out, which I'm sure you all have heard about, but I don't know how much you know about it, so I just want to clarify and refresh your memories. So earlier this year, our Republican majority state Congress passed a bill that restricted voting freedom in a lot of different ways, and how elections are decided. That bill was called SB 202, and when it got passed, our governor, of course, gladly signed it behind closed doors, and one of our Democratic congresswomen, Park Cannon, actually asked, hey, can I view the signing of the bill, which is her job to do to represent the people, and she got arrested. They arrested her for knocking on the door. You can look up the video. She's just knocking on the door and they arrested her. She still got her job though, so that's good. But what this bill does is, it's a long list of things. That's why I got this paper. So one thing it does is it halves the time you have before an election to request an absentee ballot, and shortens the deadline to return the ballot. It also requires an extra form of ID to request an absentee ballot, which is inherently classist, which means it's also racist and sexist because of our poverty issues. And also, if you're immunocompromised, how are you going to go up there and give your ID? You can do it online, but some people don't have access to computers, when before you just requested it if you were registered to vote. It shortens the length of runoff elections from 9 weeks to 4 weeks. It limits the number of absentee ballot drop boxes that a county is allowed to have, and the boxes now must be inside the building, which if you voted absentee, you know that the Spalding County one was outside. It also makes it to where you can only drop off your absentee ballot during voting days on voting hours. So the benefit of an absentee is that you could drop it off whenever. Now you can only drop it off if you can vote. So if you're working during voting hours, that's too bad, is what the state said, or the Republican side of the Congress says. it makes Sunday voting days optional for the county. The reason that's an issue is that Sunday is the day that most black voters vote on average. Mobile polls, like the buses that Fulton County used for last year's election, were prohibited. It bans anyone other than poll workers from handing out food or water, which when I went to vote in the last election, there was someone there handing out water, and it helped a lot, because even in Spalding County, I had to wait an hour in the hot sun, and there were not enough poll workers to do that. It was a third party that handed out that water. And it also allows counties to use less than previously required amount of voting booths for non-statewide elections. And it also, for absentee ballots, they check them based on the ID information that you write on the envelope rather than your signature, which is a lot easier to mess up, and to me seems like a bit of a privacy violation. And when it comes to how elections are counted, it took the Secretary of State, who is an elected official, off as the head chairman of the state election board, which the state election board is who certifies elections, and instead the state Congress gets to appoint someone as the head of that, and it gave them the ability to, in any local state election board, decide that they are unjust to decide elections, and allows them to appoint a single person for at least 9 months at a time to decide the outcome of elections. It does a lot of other things too, but those are the big points, and that was a lot of points. And there's a lot, that's why it's known as Jim Crow 2.0, because this restricts normal people from voting. It mainly poor people or older people, and also it targets black people as well and other minorities who have some issues voting in the ways that it now limits it to. But I told you all this, and I took all this time because I want you to know that. So when you go out and vote, you don't run into these problems. And you can find all this information online. So make sure your vote is counted. No matter how you vote, just make sure your vote is counted, because there's a lot of ways that they're trying to make sure that people don't vote. Things like this need to be discussed to make sure that people get their voice heard. Also, laws that are trying to get passed to fix this, For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, so you can call your senators about that. And some people may not like this, but I just got to be straight up. There is one out of our two parties that doesn't care about the rights of the LGBTQIA plus individuals, and they must be voted out of office. If you need proof that the Republican Party doesn't, or at least the politicians, don't care about you or your allies, just look up the anti-trans bills they're trying to get passed around the country. There's hundreds of them. And some of them already passed, which is very scary for someone like me who does identify as transgender. Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Mississippi, Montana, Tennessee, and West Virginia have all already passed laws that prohibit trans athletes from competing in sports. Florida's is especially egregious. In Florida, in middle and high schools, if you want to play on a sports team, someone has to inspect your genitalia.
Yeah.
That sounds like state-mandated pedophilia to me. Thank you, Ron DeSantis. I mean, it's horrible. Many states have also banned prescribing hormone blockers to minors. And if you know anything about going through puberty, minors are who need hormone blockers. Like, especially if they're questioning their gender, it helps trans kids to not have to go through puberty and then go through it again. Because if you were to decide to take hormones, you have to go through a second puberty. Hormone blockers do not hurt people. It does not stunt their development, other than it blocks sex-oriented or gender-oriented hormones. Let's see. Oh, the worst one. I had to point this one out because it is very frightening. Tennessee. Tennessee has passed a very special law. It requires all businesses that serve transgender people to put a sign on the window or the door of the business that says, "We serve trans people. Does that remind anyone of something? Segregation was not very long ago. And that sounds a lot like what some businesses had to do to allow people of color to eat there so that white patrons knew not to shop there. That's the same thing that they're doing for trans people in Tennessee now. And it also kind of reminds me of Nazi Germany, how they made the Jews hang Jude stars so that no one shopped there. And these things are hard to talk about. I mean, I almost talked myself out of not saying these things because some people may get their feelings hurt, or I mean, it almost brings me to tears, some of this stuff. I mean, they're erasing trans people. They don't make it illegal to be transgender. They make it illegal to get gender-affirming surgery, or have hormone blockers, or illegal to go out in public without being pointed out, or illegal to play sports. All these different things. It's not making being trans illegal, it's making trans people not want to be trans. It makes it more difficult. It's erasing them. There is a bill in the Senate that is looking to fix some of these things. It's called the Equality Act, and so that's something else you can call your senators about and try and campaign for if you want to get involved. Excuse me. And the other things I wanted to talk about was just getting involved, because it can mean a lot of things, whether it's just putting posts on social media or coming to things like this and meeting people, or going to city council meetings, commissioner meetings, or going to protests for these things, because one thing that people lack is information. They don't know what's happening. There's a lot of misinformation that tells people lies, and a lack of backlash lets people get away with these things. Like if you've heard what I said about these laws, and if you want to look it up to confirm that they're real, and it makes you feel angry, do the politicians that represent you know that you're angry? Do the corporations that funded these bills know that you're angry? One thing you can do to get involved is learn what corporations push for what laws, and then stop buying them. What politicians represent you? Because you may not know who your House district representative is, for the state or for the National Congress, or your senators or anything like that, or even your DAs or public city council members. All that information's online. If you don't have access to a computer, you can get that at City Hall as well. Or I'm sure the parties would also give out some of that information as well if you really needed to. But learn who these people are. You can call them, you can email them. Also, you can vote against them if they vote against you, or your friends, or your family, or your community. And I'm sorry I talked this long, but I needed to make all these points very clear, that these things are happening, because not everyone knows they're happening. The news doesn't like to talk about these things because it may hurt their ratings, it may make people upset. It makes me upset. Someone has to talk about them. And so thank you for listening. If anyone who didn't get a chance to come up wants to come up and say anything, your story, or some opinion, it doesn't matter, you're free to come up now. Otherwise, we're going to get back to this celebration. Please.
I heard something about some of the states trying to pass a law where the school system also is required not to use the students' preferred pronouns.
Do you know where that was?
I don't remember which states off the top of my head.
Yeah, and when I said there was hundreds of these laws written, I just mentioned the few that were passed. I believe the number right now, when I checked last, was 171 across the United States, and yes, some of them are in Georgia. Most of them won't pass, but they're writing a lot of them to see which ones they can get passed. Right. And also, let me say, because I ragged on Republicans a lot, and they deserve it. Also, look up the Democrats you vote for. Not all Democrats are built the same. On some of these bills, there are Democratic senators and representatives that voted for them and helped write them and champion them. Just because they're a Democrat doesn't mean they're on your side. You need to know who these people are and what they believe, no matter what party they're from, and vote for someone who's going to look out for you, your family, and your friends. Thank you.